So hey guys, welcome to another training session. So what I said, what I want to do today is do some shoulder training. So we're going to first start with warming up, of course. So some regular dumbbell curls, and then we move on to hammer curls, some front raises, side laterals, something for the triceps and also for the rear delts. So that's basically my warm up for, well, every upper body movement, even for the bench press, for example, because it's very important that your arms are all warm so that you don't injure yourself that easily. So then we're gonna move over to front raises. I first just raise them to parallel and then later on also over my head. So thereby you also get your rear delts activated. Some dumbbell shoulder press. And what I'm gonna try to do today is to do a 1 rep max attempt for my military press, so the normal standing shoulder press. I'm gonna try to attempt 70 kg, and the reason why 70 kg in my case is my 1 rep max is because I also have to basically deadlift it and perform an upright row to bring it into the position, simply because I do not have a rack at home. So I have to pick it off the floor, then basically clean it and later on press it above my head. So I'm also going to warm up the chest, simply because your chest is also involved when doing your military press, your normal overhead shoulder press. So never neglect the chest, especially the upper one, but also the chest as a whole. And of course some side laterals before we forget them. So I do not like to warm up that I feel like I performed my first working set or something like that. That's not for me the real purpose of warming up, but simply injury prevention and getting some blood in there to be able to perform. And now I have 70 kg here on the bar. It's basically my first attempt, or my first time ever trying 70 kg. So normally I should be able to press it above my head at least once, which is of course a 1 rep max attempt. But since I have to deadlift it and clean it at the same time, I'm not so sure. So yeah, let's just see, because I really think the overhead press is similar to the bench press, a very, not only a very useful but a necessary pressing movement, a necessary compound movement you have to perform, because especially if you want to be strong in your arms, bench pressing alone doesn't do. You also have to do the overhead press, simply because if you're standing, right, you're using more or less not only your whole arm, but the full range of motion of your arm. And when you're lying on a bench, you're just pressing here and not really up there. So I think therefore the overhead press engages your arms even more than the bench press. And a second thing comes into play when you're standing and you're holding basically the weight, let's say up here, okay, in your clean position, and you're then pressing it upwards like that. It's really pressing against gravity 100%, because you're standing with the weight in a straight line, So it's really pressing 100% against gravity. That's basically the difference between a leg press machine with a 45 degree angle or a flat angle, or basically the vertical leg press machine. So you see, it's all the same movement sort of, but in different angles, and angles matter. So here we go. Let's just see whether I can do it or not. So the cleaning will be very hard. So I did it twice, which is amazing. I'm very proud of myself, but now I'm a bit dizzy. So let me just rest here for a second. Now these 70 kg were quite tough, especially with the clean on the first rep. So without the cleaning, maybe I would say I could have gotten 3, but with the clean and then the press, I think that's basically it. Maybe 2.5 reps, but that doesn't do anything. So maybe later on I will be able to perform the 80 kg overhead press in the same fashion, but I have to keep in mind that then you also have to clean the 80 kg. That's not so easy. So from now on, we're basically dropping the weight to a more comfortable level. So 50 kg, that's 20 kg less, obviously, so that we get some repetitions going. And it's been a while for me since I did my last training session, simply because I was sick for so long. Not really sick that much, so that you couldn't go out and that you were in bed or had to stay in bed all the time, but simply too sick to really be in the mood and also to have the strength to do some sports. But now I feel much better, and when you come off a longer layoff, not only do you see that you need the sport mentally as a stress reliever, for example, or simply as a hobby, simply to be doing something and not simply sitting around without having anything to do, but also health-wise, because I really saw now that for the last 3 or 4 weeks when I didn't do anything, I didn't feel better. So of course your muscles and tendons and everything need some break. They need time to recover, but if it's too long, it's also not so good. So I'm also proud because of that, simply because I didn't think that I would be able to, but I did. So yeah, so now with the 50 kg, let's see how many. No, let's go for sets of 10. And of course it's always harder to do a set of 10 after such a 1 rep max attempt, although it was technically a double. So yeah, maybe I could have gotten 75 or something. Around those lines. 73, 75, something like that. And if you reach 100 kg one day, this really means a lot. So 100 kg is sort of the benchmark in overhead pressing for natural lifters, like 200 kg in a deadlift would be, or 120, 130, or let's say 140 better. 140 on the bench press, 100 on the shoulder press, 200 on the deadlift, and also around 200 on the squat. These are sort of the bench press benchmark numbers for those compound movements. And I'm not quite sure about the row. So the barbell row, for example, I'm not quite sure where the benchmark lies in this lift. Maybe you guys could tell me. But yeah, 100 kg in the overhead press is quite a feat, especially if you're not that tall. Because the taller you are, the more muscle mass you obviously can put on the frame. So then 100 kg is obviously not that much for you, but we're talking averages now. We're talking averages here, and so just for you guys to have some information and something to work on. And don't forget that it's also a very good back exercise. So you definitely need the row, of course deadlifts, pull-ups, and also the standing shoulder press to really activate all of your back muscles. Like with every compound exercise, you cannot really replace this. Of course, pull-ups and deadlifts are the most important lifts, but the rows are also important to get the thickness of the back, and this one here also works the thickness of the back. So you have basically two exercises which are more important for the width and two for the thickness. So these were now 2 sets of 50 kg, and now I'm going to perform my last set, but I'm not quite sure that I will reach 10 repetitions again, maybe just around 6 or 7. But that's okay, because then we're going to drop the weight, perform an AMRAP set, and after this AMRAP set, we're going to focus more on the side laterals. So then we have basically covered now all the shoulder heads with the compound movement, and then we move over to the side laterals, because the front, okay, now opinion differ here a little bit. Some say it's the easiest to target the front deadlift because you're basically always targeting it if you're doing the overhead press or the bench press. And some say this is the hardest to isolate because it's always incorporated in every pressing movement, but it's very hard to isolate it because, of course, if you're using a reverse butterfly, you're activating your rear delt because you're pulling backwards, and the rear delts, of course, are used for pulling. Now, if you're trying to lift to the side, you're obviously isolating the side laterals. And if you're going to the front, well, you're also using the side laterals, is what some people say, and a little bit of the front delts, but you cannot really isolate it that much. And they come around with fancy movements to isolate the front delt. But opinions differ here a little bit, and some others, as I said, say you're basically doing all front delt all the time if you're pressing whatever in whatever fashion. So you have to find it out for yourself. But for me personally, I would say the front delt is very easy to grow, very easy to get stronger and bigger. But the side laterals definitely need to catch up. That is what I personally would say when it comes to me. But you guys, tell me what you think about it. And you can also perform an isometric on your last repetition, for example. And then, especially, you will feel that your lower back, the middle of your back, and also, of course, your traps are highly activated in this lift here. So it's definitely a good back exercise as well. So, okay, let's drop the weight and perform an M-rep set. Now with only 30 kg. Before we move over then to the side aerials, side delts, and side aerials as an exercise. Whew. And that's another controversial topic. Now, when it comes to whatever body part or body group you want to train, some say always start, or most of the people say actually, start with a compound movement and later on go and isolate. And others, on the other hand, say, well, if you start with a compound movement, you're still fully fresh, you're not tired yet, and you're using way too much weight simply because you're able to, so that you're not focusing on isolating that much and contracting the specific muscles in your body. Whereas others say, well, if you isolate first and basically make the muscle as damaged and tired as you can in one half of the session, okay? And then you go over to the compound movement, you're really destroying the rest of the muscle fibers, especially the fast twitch muscle fibers, which you cannot tackle if you're doing isolating exercises, simply because they focus not on the fast twitch muscle fibers, but on the long twitch muscle fibers. These muscle fibers that you see when bodybuilders, for example, got rid of all their water and body fat and they flex and pose, but you cannot really see the fast twitch muscle fibers, and those are very important, however, for power movement, explosive movements, and therefore for increasing the weight in your lifting career. So it really depends, and I would always say try everything, alternate if you can, but also stick to something if it works for you. So now with the M-rep set, let's see. Oh. So now we're basically done with the hard stuff. Now I'm isolating my side delts, and I'm using those 8 kg dumbbells here. So here we go. Now, what you can of course also do is take a movement where you isolate a certain muscle and overload it with weight for your first two sets. What I wanted to say, and then drop down in weight and use less momentum, which is also something that works out for me, and which especially worked out for me when I wanted to build my side delts. The reason why it really works also in isolation movements, especially very well when it comes to shoulders, is because they are relatively small. So relatively small, but very important, because you're using those in every upper body movement there is. So they are permanently used, but not permanently used to a great degree. And therefore, you do not have so many specific movements for shoulders especially, and I think that's the reason why it really works out so well when you overload on shoulders and basically progress this way. This is not necessarily always the best way for every body part, but certainly for shoulders, and especially for my side deltoids, I think that worked out very well. See? So you get a different angle. And what some people say is more doing damage than doing good is hypersetting. But hypersetting to a really extreme degree. Now what I do sometimes, and what I've done, and what also worked out for me when trying to grow my side deltoids, was doing like a session of 45 minutes, one exercise only, and as many repetitions per set as you can. Of course with breaks in between, just like now, but more activity, less breaks, of course less weight, but constantly engaging the muscles you want to grow. So I said to myself, well, even if I eat good or good enough, and if I eat enough and I rest enough and do this training session, and it doesn't work out for me in terms of more muscle mass, at least what I can get out of this is more definition. And especially when it comes here to the shoulders, I think the definition is so important in terms of looks, because if you haven't got a decent definition where your side head of the shoulder is really separated from the rear and the front deltoid, you do not have those massive and impressive looking shoulders you really want to have. So sometimes it's better to work on definition first and then on mass, which is normally not the thing I really like, because I say to myself, the more mass you have in advance, the easier it is to work on definition without losing so much mass. But it worked out for me. I even thought that doing this hyperset session for 45 minutes also benefited me in terms of muscle mass. So just go and find out for yourself. So I'm gonna do a couple of last repetitions, and then I'm gonna stop, since it's my first training session in 4 weeks or so. I'm quite tired actually. That's also something you always have to keep in mind when you're also using your body as work, like I am. You also have to keep in mind that you do not overtrain. First, of course, to not be so tired and sick that you cannot work, but also because you need more time to recover when you're also using a lot of your body at work. And that's the case with me now. So, nevertheless, it was a good training session. I really enjoyed it, but I really have to train more regularly now to get back into the same mindset I had previously, before I got sick. So I hope you enjoyed the training session. I hope you got some knowledge out of it. And as I said, be open-minded. Try everything new you hear of, and figure it out for yourself whether it's beneficial for you or not. Okay, see you the next time.